So urban climate change is a special issue, and there have been focused efforts, cooperation between cities under the Rockefeller Foundation, 40 resilient cities and so on. But here the focus in this infographic by the visual capitalist is on the material impact of global urbanization. So we're going to look at various things like the global population living in cities and towns is expected to rise 80% by 2050. With the expansion of cities, the material consumption is expected to grow from 41.1 billion tons in 2010 to 88.8 billion tons by 2050. So more than doubling of material demand there. But the other thing to remember is that cities only cover 2% of the world's land surface, but activities within their boundaries consume over 75% of the material resources. Less than 2% of the area is inhabited by a population that is consuming more than 75% of planet's material resources. So start with the domestic material consumption, which is basically all physical imports minus all physical exports. Here starting with steel, cement and sand, for example, 2010 baseline here, and it's going to grow considerably by 2050 in tons per year, like the numbers we are looking at here. People living in cities is projected to go from 3.5 billion in 2010 to 6.3 billion in 2050. But population projections are always problematic, so you have to make sure that there are large uncertainties in these as well. Just in terms of overall population increase across the globe, with fertility rates dropping everywhere, and where the population centers will be, whether they will continue to be Asia, India, China and so on, or Africa will take over, or whether all of them will begin to decrease, and how much of that will grow as urban population. It's guaranteed that urban population is going to increase because urban centers are centers of innovation in terms of just number of patents applied, for example, patent applications, and also in terms of financial activities, employment opportunities and so on. So there are attractions for poor people within the country or within a state, and often also across international boundaries, because if you go to places, big cities across Europe and US, you will see taxi drivers are all mostly immigrants, for example, or even dry cleaning stores, vegetable vendors, all sorts of employment opportunities attract immigrants within the states, within countries and across countries as well. African cities will double in population by 2050, so that's the population center I was talking about, with material consumption jumping from 2 billion tons to 17.7 billion tons as projected by 2050. So here in 2010 it's around 2 billion. The growth of material consumption is more than 792% to 17.7 billion projected for 2050. In South Asia, this is the part covering here all the way across from Iran, Pakistan, parts of Afghanistan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal and so on, goes from 2.7 billion tons to 8.6 billion tons in 2050, a rise of 223%. Southeast Asia, which includes Burma, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia and New Guinea and all these regions here, will jump by 180% from 2 billion tons to 5.6 billion tons. Okay, so not really small numbers. It's not clear where this will come from, the material itself, whether it will be domestic, imported, and Africa right now which exports a lot of things to the rich countries. How is it going to grow by these numbers? So those are not really explained here. Southeast Asia, we already looked at. I don't know why I put that in here again. material consumption in Eastern Asia is dominated by China, so that includes here, but includes Japan and Mongolia as well. I think also some eastern parts of China, maybe small East Asian countries, whose total domestic material consumption is projected to increase from 4.9 billion tons in 2010 to 13 billion tons by 2050, which is 113%. So China has already grown tremendously, so you can imagine that its projection for 2050 is only 113%, as opposed to, for example, Southeast Asia, which is at 180%, Africa, which is at 792%, South Asia, which is at 223%, and so on. Oceania, which includes New Guinea, Eastern New Guinea here, and Australia and New Zealand, is going to jump 136% from 1.1 billion tons in 2010 to 2.6 billion tons projected for 2050. Okay. Central and South Asia, Central and South America down here, up 71%, 6.5 to 11.1 billion tons. Europe only up 25% by 2050, from 8.3 billion tons to 10.4 billion tons by 2050, and North America sees a modest increase of 17%, so going from 7.7 billion tons to 9 billion tons. These are misleading because the baseline is 2010. Historical consumption has been very high in Europe and North America, so comparing growing economies like Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Africa, and so, or even South America, is not always a fair comparison historically, but nonetheless, the world's next megacities, where are they going to come up? Megacities are urban areas housing 10 or more million people. They're often among the centers of economic activity in a country. So Mumbai, for example, is the financial capital of India, and New York City is the financial capital of the US, as is often referred to by people, right? Currently there are 32 megacities in the world housing 545 million people. As urbanization continues, where will the next megacities be? London, UK, going from 2022 population to 2030 population of 9.5 to 10.2, so crossing into the 10 million threshold. Tehran going from 9.4 to 10.2 by 2030, becoming a megacity. Luanda, Angola, projected to be the largest new megacity with over 12 million inhabitants, going from 9 billion in 2022 to 12.1 billion. Ahmedabad, India, 8.5 to 10.2. Okay, this is Tehran here. Chengdu, 9.5 to 10.7. Nanjing, 9.4 to 11. Ho Chi Minh City, 9 to 11. Seoul, Korea, is already at 10 as projected for 2022. Seoul's population is 9.97 million, so it's not categorized as a megacity yet in 2022, but it'll cross over by 2030 for sure. So China is always confusing in many ways, because even though Beijing and Shanghai are most heard of outside, the biggest cities tend to be some unknown places. So Chengdu is here, Nanjing is here, and the many megacities in China, you won't even know the name. Guangzhou is one, I think, and there is one, the biggest city, 30 million, is not China, not Shanghai or Beijing or Guangzhou. It's some other city whose name skips my mind at this point. Okay. Finally, how the expansion of megacities will boost metal markets. By 2035, Asian cities as a group will be richer than European and North American cities combined. Is that good news? Well, in some ways it is for the countries which are trying to grow economically. as countries expand and people get richer, cars get more numerous, electricity and public transport networks expand. All this means more steel, more copper, more aluminum. And this is not even talking about electrification of things which will require lithium, nickel, cobalt, and so on, right? So this infographic takes a look at what metals demands will be if urbanization and rising incomes continue to 2035 using the data from Swarin Global, which is the source referred to here. So Earth's natural resource powers our everyday lives. Visual capitalist elements break down the building blocks of the universe. Okay, so here is steel going from 1.7 to 2.6 million, so 53% increase by 2035. Nickel 2.5 to 5.2 million, 116%. Copper 26% going from 23.6 million to 29.7 million. Zinc going from 13.7 million to 14.5 million. That's a 6% jump there. And aluminum sees a whopping 57% going from 66 million in 2019 in demand, that's million tons, to 103 million tons by 2035, a 57% jump. So urbanization is an inevitable outcome of human economic activities and attraction to urban areas for finding an ecosystem in which a lot of innovation happens, a lot of financial trading, financial dealings happen, banking, etc., and that attracts the rest of the service industry and workforce and so on. But all that comes with this increased material consumptions and metal markets, and we have elsewhere mentioned how bad mining for these metals is for the environment as well. And while lithium batteries are saviors in terms of moving from fossil fuels to renewables, but the production of lithium and impacts of geopolitics like the wars on the supply of metals and the supply chains are going to be very complicated issues as we go forward. Okay, let's leave it here. This is just a curiosity kind of thing, but very closely tied in with climate change as well. Of course, population growth is going to be unpredictable at this point. Some projections say it'll drop by a lot, maybe down to 1 billion by 2100, but what does that mean for urbanization? That's not clear. And also it's not clear whether overall consumption will really go down if population goes down, or whether a smaller number of people will just be richer and consuming more than compensating for the drop in population, for example, and how that translates to urban population, urban consumption, urban metal demand, and so on. Okay, very complicated, but just keep these things in mind. Okay.